Hello, good evening, everyone. Yes, come in, come in. So thank you very much for being here tonight with us. Thanks for joining. Sorry, my voice is a bit off, but yeah, don't mind the sound of my voice. Thanks for joining us. This is the last of a series of 3 international seminars organized by the GRRIPP project. This is the GRRIPP project. And so GRRIPP stands for gender responsive resilience and intersectionality in policy and in practice. It's a 4-year project funded by UKRI and headed here at UCL at IRDR, our department. We are really, really delighted to have you here tonight. Before I go any further, do you all have downloaded Zoom on your phones? Yes? Thumbs up. Do you all have your headphones? Are you all connected to your language channel of preference? So you have a choice between English, Portuguese, or Spanish. Yes? Okay. So we will have, our guests will be speaking in their own language. So if you don't speak Spanish or Portuguese, you need to connect to the translation channel. Okay. Okay, so tonight's event is we'll be debating gender, climate change, and sustainable development. As I was saying, is the 3rd event. We had one in February on care, livelihoods, and crisis. Then one last month, in March, about gender resilience and intersectionality, and this is the last one. The aim of those events was to bring the different projects, the different local projects that make up GRRIPP, this big 4-year project. And the whole aim of GRRIPP was that we transferred money to different regions, to Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And they led their own call, and they led their own local project and activities. And we have been bringing all our awardees to London in 3 different events to tell you what they have been doing and share with you their incredible experience and knowledge. And we are so delighted to have them here tonight, and so honored that you joined us to listen to them, exchange with them, and hear a little bit more about the incredible work that they do. Tonight we have guests from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Tanzania, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Those are the speakers, but they came with their colleagues, and our different team members are here in the audience as well, so thank you very much for being here. I won't take too much longer. I just wanted to thank some specific people. So first of all, our department, IRDR, and Sarah Jill, who's been helping us with the communication. Thank you so much. Thanks to our founder, UKRI, for funding GRRIPP and this series of events. Thank you to my team in London. Thank you to Maureen, our principal investigator. Thank you to our finance colleagues, Hui, Naja, and Deborah. Thank you to Levy and Zara, who have been helping a lot with the organization of the event and the logistics. And thank you to Olivia, who's sharing with me and has also been organizing a lot of behind-the-scenes activities. Thank you to the translators who are online. It is so important to us that our guests can speak in their own language, and without translation, this would not have been possible, so thank you very much. Thank you to you, our amazing speakers. Thanks for joining us from far away and being here the whole week with us in London. And thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us tonight. Okay, so we have 6 projects, 7 speakers, because one of the project wanted to split, so they have 2 people speaking instead of 1. We will ask each of them a question. They will have 10 minutes to answer, and then we'll have a Q&A with you, those who are here face-to-face, and those who are online. Please feel free to send your questions in the chat. So our first question tonight is for Valentina from RMCC. So your work focuses on developing climate adaptation plans at the municipal level in Argentina. And so could you tell us, in your view, why it is important to include gender in all of its meaning in climate change mitigation and adaptation policies, and how you did it in your project? And please introduce yourself as well.
Can you hear me? Okay. Bueno, hola, buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy Valentina de Marco.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Valentina De Marchi, and I represent the project in the areas of Neuquén and Rio Negro. I'm coordinator for the Alliance of the Network of Argentina regarding climate changes, includes 280 municipalities and of Argentina. It has an executive branch of specialists. And from our secretariat, we give advice, technical advice to the municipalities so they can produce their strategy of mitigation and adaptation to climate change, developing specific plans, and within these plans, the documents that allow us to establish our strategies. The mitigation is important, but we've got to fight against the changes of climate. We have to understand which activities emit gas, and according to that, we're going to determine our actions. And the same with adaptation. We do a diagnosis, establish our objectives, and establish the actions that are going to allow us to establish the policies, the public policies that will work best. We do, with the diagnosis, we do an evaluation of risk, climate risk. We identify the threats within our territory, and we put them in a map, and we do the same with the population that is most vulnerable. We define the indicators of vulnerability, perhaps poverty level, education level, whether they are close to health centers and basic centers, and analyze their needs. And then we try to define vulnerability, and again, we will put this in a map. Where is this population? And then we consider all these facts in order to understand where are the risks, the climatic risk. The risk is an intersection between the climatic risk and the vulnerable population. That's where we have more intensity of threats due to the vulnerability, and then we can bring in the public policies. And why am I telling you all this? Because we do all these diagnoses, we establish our objectives, their actions, the public policies, but we need to determine how to implement them. And for this, we need external finance. We detected we have to show how gender was incorporated in order to have access to the finances. We realized this because not the secretariat, not the municipalities were clear about what gender was. We didn't know how to detect it. We didn't know how to find it in society, and where was the link with climate change. Then we came to GRRIPP in order to rely on a specialist in gender that would be able to work together with us and with the municipalities. It's no good work only within the professional team, but we want to work also within the territories through the municipalities. This was our project. We had 4 stages, one of formation, gender, climate change, and understand the connection between both, understand how we can generate mitigation policies, taking into account climate and gender. This was directed to the specialists and to the municipalities. One, we had the formation, we went through a second stage, the networking. We work close with the municipalities to make sure they understood the concepts, make sure what they understood or what they didn't. And we make sure they have more professionals to continue with the advice. And from there, we developed a methodology in order to understand the best and more practical way for these 4 municipalities, the one we are working with this pilot project, Catriel, Villachocón, Neuquén, and Chiclén, all from the region of Neuquén, in order to prepare a guidance to explain how they came to understand the concepts and how they incorporated this to their plans of adaptation to climate change and to their policies of public actions. This was our project. And finally, we went into a planification, our first 4 plans, and then we involved society in the last stage. So we managed to explain this plan to each of the communities of the 4 municipalities so they could understand what the municipalities were doing, and we related those to risk control. It's a bit of noise in the surroundings, apologize. Then that was the time when we say we have to determine which common risks were both the 4 municipalities suffering from. And what we detected was the floods. Why they had floods? Because it's a region that has a drought, and it's been in drought for more than 14 years. When it rains, the rain is intense, but the rain does not go into the earth, doesn't filter into the earth. We decided to do some tree planting. We included the schools, we invited the schools, so they would understand the importance of planting trees in specific places, places that were subject to floods, where they understood that the trees are not only for oxygen and shade, but they will help with the infiltration into the earth in order to solve the risk that these 4 municipalities were facing. This is a way to show the plan and bring them into the plan. And in order to finalize my speech, we have to say, well, which was the importance of this for us to bring gender into the action plans? First, this was something that was required in order to have access to finance, external finance. And after this, we became conscious, we realized the essential fact that we have to get to know society. We got to get to know all the groups, to understand that each group has a different impact. Each group has different needs. They have different reply capacity in front of a threat. We have to get to know this, analyze this in order to be able to establish the best public policies to make sure that we have more impact through our municipalities. This is important with the help of GRRIPP, and we had a lot of exchanges, and we realized the importance of working in the gender subject, but allowed us to take into account different religions, cultures, migrants, indigenous people, we didn't limit ourselves to certain groups, but we wanted to get to know the whole of society. We thank GRRIPP for this, and in order to really finish this speech, I want to say a sentence that is a synthesis of work. Carol Amaral said from the National Net of Municipalities, Carol said, help me to see what I am unable to see through my privileges. I wrote these sentences, and when I finished the project, I wanted to complete this great sentence, and I said, help me to see that with my privileges, I cannot see, and I will help you to see what you cannot see with your privileges. And let's meet halfway. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Olivia Walmsley, and I work for the GRRIPP London team, and it's a pleasure to co-chair with Louisa tonight. So my question is for Maria Matui from the Gender and Climate Change Coalition, Tanzania. Maria, I would like to ask you, well, to start with, in 2022, the Office of the Vice President in Tanzania worked with the civil society to popularize the National Climate Change Response Strategy. Can you please explain your methodologies and actions to disseminate this plan to affected populations and to create impact at a local level?
Thank you. Can you hear me? So my name is Maria Matui from Tanzania, working for Gender and Climate Change Coalition. And responding to the question, we have been fortunate to be among few selected grantees in African continent, and in Tanzania, we have been implementing the project, which was popularizing gender in all climate change strategies. And we started by popularizing the National Climate Change Response Strategy for 2021-2026. And we have been fortunate in working towards implementation of this project. We were working with the Office of the Vice President, which is a designated authority under the Ministry of the Environment in the country, to oversee all environment and climate change issues. So why this was important for us, and what is the plan for disseminate the project? In Tanzania, as many countries in Africa and at the global, we have policies, strategies, and of course we are responding at the national, regional, and international mechanisms, specifically those which are focusing on climate change. But the unfortunate bit of that, gender has not been really a priority, to say that coming up strong enough in the sense of implementation, and specifically in allocation of resources and to the communities which are affected by climate change. So as the coalition, we did analysis of policies and strategies in the country. And with that gap, and after engaging the Office of the Vice President and being allowed to continue by working with them to engage the designated people within the Office of the Prime Minister, of course, given that the context of the government document was not supposedly to be distorted with the meaning, it has supposed to contain the same essence of the government as it was previously envisioned, by again to include gender, which was silent in the documents. So we work with the civil society, academia, and the office itself to bring the gender issues in these strategies and to see how the affected community will be now part of the process going forward. So how are we planning to disseminate the report? I might give a bit of history of my country. So we are rich in valleys, rivers, and we are a huge population residing in rural areas, and very few are elites and those who are privileged to either have access to information and even to interpret that information which they're able to access. And with that gap, which we realized as the coalition, we envisioning to work with the different stakeholders to ensure that the document will not just be shelved in the cupboards or wherever that can be shelved, but really having an impact to the communities that will be able to be engaged, understand, and question and demand what is rightful for them. So with that now, we will be working with the government officials again as the Office of Vice Presidents and the Ministry of Development and Gender, Ministry of Local Authorities, and these are the specific ministry and very strategic for us because they are working directly with the rural communities, but they are working with local authorities which have been identified as partners towards the implementation of our project. We are going to work with the civil society organization and CBOs, which are directly residing in those areas where the project will be implemented. So maybe if I have to touch a bit on the document which we have popularized. There is another document which came after that one, which now there are specific areas that the government will be focusing given the effect of climate change in those areas. And this is also the areas as the coalition will also be tapping so that we do not use much resources, but rather engage with already existing platforms so that we can ensure that we are able to reach the targeted audience. In doing so, we are going to have police briefs, which will be translated again in Kiswahili. That's the language. We have two national languages, Kiswahili and English, but Kiswahili is the most dominated language in my country. So we have the translated version, which is the bulk document, which will be, of course, under the custody of the Office of the Vice President, but we'll have police briefs, which will be translated in Kiswahili and again will be in English. And this to give the academia and those in other platforms which are more academic to still be able to enforce, but also to advocate for what we saw that will be relevant at academic atmosphere. We are going to work with artists, and again, my country has a beautiful, how do I say this? Culture of being available and being present when there is art. So we're going to use paints, we are going to use songs, we are going to use poems, but we are going to use the traditional music according to localities where this project and program and the document will be disseminated. So this will be very short clips of information according to the 16 areas that have been gendered, popularized in the document, and speaking directly to the issues according to the communities, given that we have 120 some tribes in my country, and they all have different vernaculars. We are going to work with local authorities. We started last year, and this year again, we are going to use marathon, climate change marathon. While we are engaging in this marathon, we'll be mobilizing resources, but also looking at women, particularly in the areas that such as restoration, beekeeping. But this is going to be complementing the VPO document, which is the climate change strategy in those 16 areas, which includes fishery, which include beekeeping, which include agriculture, and areas that will be now directly speaking to the needs of those communities. And we are going to use the media, both mainstream and social media, because we have a population of young people, and most of those young people are more available in social media. And of course, the elite generation, which is in mainstream media. And we started already by working in partnership with journalists for environment, and we have trained some journalists to look into gender issues and how they should be reported, specifically looking on the document which has been popularized. We are going to ensure that the monitoring and evaluation will not just be done by the coalition, which is members of the organization, but all the partners which will be on the process of the dissemination will be key partners to inform how this document has really been translated into those communities and what impact has been registered and what challenges, of course, will be present so that we can be able to inform the Office of the Vice President, but again to inform the project which we are be able to say what have been achievable in that time frame. We are working with academia, given the scarcity of resources as a civil society. So we are working with the Climate Change Center for Climate Change at the University of Dar es Salaam, and they are giving us an input in the documents which will be prepared as the police briefs, but then translating them in a manner that they'll be able meaningful to the academics, but also relevant to the communities that we are going to work with. So why all these are beautiful as they may seem, it is really a challenge when we speak about gender and maybe on this case women, but all the gender group which are represented by the gender category. And this is something which either it's still work in progress or it needs more conversation. So we look into the macro and micro policies in my country. So this is at the micro level. But for us at the coalition, we see the relevance and the importance of these negotiations, which always happen at a very high level, and the unfortunate presence of women and other groups, young people, persons with disabilities, elderly, not being present in those spaces, given the laxity or pushback. We're now, as an organization or civil society, starting to engage them, telling them this is what is happening at the national level. This is what's happening at the global level. To them, this is an alien language. It's an alien because they've not been part of the process. So with these documents, we are hoping and we are looking forward, and it is our aspiration. That's why we are putting together all the stakeholders at different walks of life, artists, marathon, women in the rural areas, to speak about the issues that really matters to them in the language they understand, and that to be contextualized at the national level through the policies, through the programs, but very specific, ensuring there is resource allocated to these programs and projects, and with these people being present to having those conversations. So we started from the GRRIPP projects, and we are continuing, and we are hoping with what we have in present, because it has opened eyes to many other organizations, but even in other institutions which were silent on gender issues, climate change, disaster. Women have been seen in other groups that they are recipients, but their needs were not being tabled, as they are not being present to tell their own needs, but rather assumptions according to the maybe general practices which have been happening in different parts. So maybe I'll end here, and if I have more minutes, I'll speak.
Thank you. 1 more minute.
Oh, I have 1 minute. So thank you so much, and I hope to engage.
Thank you. And Maria, do you want to say something about the art that is being displayed?
Yes, so we brought some of the arts that we are engaging the community back home, and we have an artist who came with us in London. So that is part of the work we are doing, and we are doing the exhibitions at the community, with local authorities, but with other artists which have been taken through the training and being taken through the popularized documents to understand what are the issues and how now they can translate that information to the communities.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for bringing the paintings from Tanzania. So our next question is for the project Agape Hidricos, and Janet and Lorena will share their time because they wanted to both be answering and sharing with you. So the question for them is regarding the use of water. So Chile has been experiencing mega drought due to a multitude of reasons, including the effects of climate change, extractivism, and poor water management. So could you both tell us, from your experience, how is access to water a gender and intersectional issue, and how can we make the role of women in the care and defense of water systems more visible? And please introduce yourselves as well.
Hi.
Hola.
Can you hear me? Hi to all of you. For us, it's essential to explain the context of the situation in Chile. Chile is a country that has waters that are privatized, and the control is also private. It's one of the few countries with this situation. This happened after the dictatorship of Pinochet, who in 1980 gave a constitution establishing that the ownership of water, and he divided through the act, the Water Act, that supports privatization and defends the ownership of waters. In 81, this water business is established also as economic model in my area. My area is Valparaíso, is the province that established this or used this model for the first time. And sadly, This act gives the water to private hands, political individuals, business individuals with great influence in Chile, and the water is given to them almost for free and forever. This leaves territories with rights to use the water, and the code separates the water from the earth. Therefore, we have people owning the water and other people owning earth, land, but no water. And this creates a tremendous problem for the people that after some time, there is a lot of speculation. We have some millions and millions of, sorry, it's a consultation going on. You have to buy a right to use water for some 30,000 pounds. All this affects the rural survival. And sadly, on 2009, there is a decree for the first time in Chile, a water catastrophe zone. And in my province, we create a movement for the defense of water. And my organization is Modatima, starts action. We were left without water. Our area is considered a catastrophe zone. The whole territory becomes dry, and we start see large extensions of avocados plantations that have been planted on the sides of the hills, because at that time these people could also purchase at very low price the land. And at the same time, the forests were being burned. It was the way they got rid of the forests. We had investigations regarding all the trees that were only growing in that area. They disappeared. This situation was difficult, affected the people from the countryside. We started to see the water tanks approaching our areas, and it was we were not sure of the quality of the water of these lorries that were delivering the water. Even today, that's the situation. These waters may be contaminated, and is evidence of this through observations done by the Institute of Human Rights in Chile. The women specifically have been affected at every level, affecting their health in the territories, taking into account that we've been catastrophic areas since 2009, and today 53% of our population is considered area of water catastrophe. We are receiving this water of dubious quality with a lorry, and this is affecting the health of women, sexual and reproductive health. And we, together with different organizations of human rights in territories like Petorca, have a subject to lack of hygiene. And sadly, we consider This is a matter of violence against our women and our girls. We have schools that have no water, schools that work from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., but the girls don't have access to the toilets. They only have 1 hour during those long hours to use the facilities. It's a matter of great violence that is being suffered by the woman in our territory. This water that comes through the lorries is carried by the woman themselves. This also affects their health. This carrying water since they are young has brought up prolapses, pelvic prolapses, and it happens to even women that haven't had children yet. This has been very important for us as an organization to be able to tell not just what's happening in Petorca, but what's happening in the rest of the country where the same type of violence is present. And we think it's very important to this project that is taking place. And really, GRRIPP fulfill our dream of the woman from Modatima, the woman from Petorca, because we were in a backwards area, and it allows us to consider how these women are living through all these things that we became aware of as we went forward. We started the fight for the recuperation of the water in Chile. We incorporated the gender aspect to the water. This was a complex matter. We didn't have enough data. We had nothing, and we had to build slowly. And we realized the system supported by a law, the water law, and the organization of water users are not chosen with a vote, but they have rights to use water. Who has more rights can become part of the organization, can control the waters, and we as women do not have access to this level. These institutions belong to the government, and it's very difficult for me to reduce all this Chilean context because there are many dimensions to it. And these 3 dimensions that we considered, including the control of the rural waters, which is extremely important for us. And this comes into this project, Agape Hídrico. You can go into a website called Observatorio Causa, a web page with the full information on each river and the peculiar situation. And you're going to find there the voices of the women that have been affected. Janet is a colleague that we believe we have to give our respect to all these people, and I want you to give clap hands for my colleague because she gave her body, her life to serve the community. And really, these waters that they're working on, these are the waters that we need in Chile. And therefore, that's so important. I would like my colleague, Janet, to say a few words. Thank you. Can you hear me? We are the resistance of the territory regarding communal waters. We are 10% of the water of our country, water that is still in the hand of the community. The rest is already in private hands. Therefore, we are living in the countryside, in a rural area, and when the water was privatized, we realized it was in the interest of the big capitals. We supported ourselves through our work by giving water to the rural communities. In Chile, we did this work because the government puts resources into the infrastructures, and the communities have to organize themselves, and they have to be in charge of all the activities, prepare the projects, their functioning, ensure that everybody gets water daily, establish a tariff in order to survive. This is the work that we are doing, and as Lorena said, it's a job for which we don't get any payment, and we work at this full time. And we found out that mainly women, 50% were the leaders fighting for getting water for their communities. And we realized too that if we organize ourselves, we could face the draft, and we expect for 2040, having done some research, we know that that's going to hit us. Therefore, we have this organization at national level, and we are working together in order to face this crisis that is coming to damage our communities. And this is all because time is short. Also, we want to thank GRRIPP for their help, for their work. This is our first stage. We now have to work along with other water projects in Chile.
Next, I would like to ask a question to Rabul from Dhaka University. Rabul, from your research on the utilization of maternal healthcare services during the COVID-19 pandemic, what are some of the biggest challenges women face in disaster-prone areas, and what are the lessons learned for access to services in disaster contexts? And please introduce yourself.
Good evening. Am I audible? My name is Mohammad Rabiul Haq. Professionally, I am involved with the Department of Population Sciences, University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, as an academician. Before I start about my research, I need to say a couple of words about the disaster. Bangladesh is one of the disaster-prone countries in the world, and there are around 24 disaster-affected districts in the country, which is identified by the government of the Bangladesh. On the other hand, our health system is pluralistic as well as very much hierarchical. And healthcare services basically provided at rural areas, door-to-door services. I mean, service providers visit the households of the clients and provide healthcare services. So like all other types of disaster when affects all in our country, but women experienced a greater toll of the disaster effects, and they compromised a lot with their healthcare service utilization. My research was focused on the utilization of healthcare services, especially maternal healthcare services during the COVID-19 pandemic in the Bangladesh. For this research, I have collected data from one of the disaster-prone countries, which is located in the coastal areas of the country. And I have collected data, 300 households from the rural areas and another 300 households from the urban areas to make a comparison between the rural and urban areas to see the effects of COVID-19 on utilization of maternal healthcare services. And I have found that disaster affects household socio-economic conditions and the a lot of households have experienced the household-related damages, especially job discontinuation and losses of income. Households' income is reduced due to the social restrictions and pandemic protection-related mechanisms, because government has a very strong social protection and social restriction mechanism during the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, a lot of households member has had to disconnect to their jobs because particularly for those women and men who have informal settlements or informal sector jobs. On the other hand, when households had a social protection system or restriction, strong social restrictions, a larger number of adolescents girls have had to discontinue to their education, which further leads to them earns a larger number of child marriages in our country, particularly in rural and areas. Some women are reduced to forced to being one of the critical findings, and that during the disaster system, including the pandemic, households, particularly the male partner, forced their wives to bring money or financial supports from their parental law's house. If they couldn't fail, in that time they experience physical assault or mental assaults by their intimate partners. On the other hand, utilization of healthcare services has been reduced a lot during the pandemic situation. Their access to and utilization of contraceptive services during COVID-19 system was affected highly, particularly during the lockdown period. And access to and use of modern sanitary napkins was highly declined during that time. And with some of the women's are use of healthcare facilities for pregnancy-related care during even the antenatal care services during pregnancy, and delivery care services at hospital as well as post-delivery care services was affected very much, particularly for those who experience loss of households income or who have to discontinue their jobs. Availability of care and providers reduced also due to the stress, anxiety, and fear of COVID-19 infection during that time. That was the first question. Some of the challenges that women faces are the availability of services affected both from the provider's perspective as well as from the receiver's perspectives. In-depth interview of the service receivers, they have mentioned that in many cases, service providers are not allowed to visit their home because of COVID infection and other aspects. On the other hand, service receivers also didn't encourage or didn't feel importance to visit healthcare services for maternal healthcare services or SRIs, sexual and reproductive healthcare related any services. Availability of care and care providers also. Second challenge is maternal healthcare needs are also not prioritized during the COVID-19. The health system, all of the health system from top level to the bottom level, they focused on the COVID protection mechanisms rather than on the utilization of maternal healthcare services. So the sexual and reproductive health, including maternal healthcare services, are very much neglected during the COVID-19 situation in our country. Accessibility to the services was disrupted due to the limited transport facilities as well as fear of COVID-19 protection. On the other hand, since I have conducted my research in one of the disaster-poor areas, natural disaster also has a strong effect on, they have experienced a double shot-bladed. So they have experienced natural disaster as well as they have also experienced COVID-19. As a result, they couldn't visit healthcare facilities because of broken communication system and other problems. Affordability was also another problem, reduced due to the reduced income and households income. Secondly, SRIs or sexual reproductive health related issues are neglected due to the perceived needs of the barriers. You know that in my country, women are always sacrificed their needs, the health needs, with other important needs of the family. During disasters in our country, all of the households members are very much concerned about how to lose or how to minimize the loss of the disaster effects, especially the income loss and households protection and other things. In that case, women always focus less on their health needs and others. If until there is an emergency or life-threatening issues, they didn't want to visit the healthcare providers or somewhere. Since the government has the restrictions and the healthcare providers could not visit the households members, so they also have a little chance to go to the healthcare facilities. So the utilization of healthcare service reduced very much in that time. And another problem is discontinuation of jobs and losses of households' income. So the first threshold or first challenge is the income loss of the households, and that income loss of the households leads to the women to lower utilization of healthcare services. Women manage their needs or accessibility in some cases by using alternative service providers. For example, for contraceptive users, they depend on the neighbors to borrow contraceptives from there, or in some cases, they visit local pharmacies and the drug sellers to buy contraceptives or sanitary napkins or some other things. I have talked with the healthcare providers from their initiatives to know their initiatives, and they told that they have introduced healthcare buckets or baskets in particular areas with the help of the local resources, so that they can put all of the contraceptives and some basic medicines in a basket in front of the households of a house, so that if somebody feels needed, they can go and pick the contraceptive or other things during the COVID-19 situation, particularly during the lockdown situation. Sometimes they also receive pregnancy care through the over telephone, or sometimes they using social media and other things for healthcare services, but that services was inadequate, and limits their service utilization. For example, if a woman preferred to use 4-time antenatal visits during her pregnancy, during COVID-19, they used 1 time or 2 times instead of 4 times. And delivered in many cases during COVID-19, the women who delivered their children, they delivered at home instead of healthcare facilities. And in most of the cases, they took birth assistance from a traditional healthcare provider instead of qualified healthcare providers. Utilization of post-delivery care was also reduced. So we have also tried to recommend something I have only 1 minute probably. Future research needs to focus on the preparedness of the healthcare facilities for providing basic or minimum initial reproductive healthcare services, even during a COVID-19 situation or any other types of emergency situation. Integration and inclusion of sexual and reproductive healthcare services are needed with the disaster risk reduction programs and other climate initiatives programs. Inclusion of women into the disaster risk management committees are very much important to to identify their needs as well as to address their needs. And in that cases, local mobilization of the local resources like youth population, local volunteers, and women's, there are some other disaster management committees at grassroots levels that could help them a lot to address the needs of the local population during an emergency situation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. My next question is for Ramona Miranda from Duryog Nivaran. Your work has analysed the effectiveness of existing governance mechanisms to deal with frequent disasters such as floods and cyclones during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how disaster management policies were used or applied to limit the spread of the pandemic. I would like to know, based on your findings, what are your key recommendations to ensure a more sustainable, gender-inclusive form of development?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So thanks for this opportunity to reflect a little bit from some of the recommendations that are coming out of the research. The research that we carried out was called Enhancing Public Sector Accountability and Transparency for Gender Inclusion in Response to Natural Hazard-Induced Disasters and COVID-19 Pandemic in South Asia. This was supported by the GRRIPP project in South Asia as part of its governance in pandemics and beyond. So we carried out literature reviews, ground level research in India from in two cyclone affected villages from the Patan district in Gujarat, and in Nepal in the Makwanpur district of province 3. So that's where we carried out the field level research. And there was, of course, literature surveys and interviews of local government officials, and interviews and focus group discussions at the ground level. So before we sort of go further, maybe we need to just take a minute to look at what do we think is a gender inclusive form of government. So that means women are included in the planning processes and that their priorities are taken into account. Basically, that integration of a gender equality perspective is there across all government action. So we think that it's a strategy that will help governments to make better decisions to achieve gender equality, including as they related to not only policy, but also to spending decisions. So this is what a gender inclusive form of government is, yet it is challenging in the South Asian region due to age-old perceptions, patriarchy, the related stereotyping that goes on, that are reflected in the governance, in the policies, and so forth. And I'm sure that's sort of common in some of the other regions as well. So the research came out with the rich, before I go on to the recommendations, came out with a rich assortment of information, some of which are already known, some of which my colleague here just touched upon a little while ago. But the key impacts that we noted were in the livelihood related impacts, where unemployment, the informal, which included domestic workers who lost their jobs during the pandemic, migrant worker. You know that majority of women work in the informal sector, so those were affected. Also the women-led SMEs, they took much longer to recover. I mean, men-led SMEs as well as those by women were affected equally, but the women-led ones took much longer to recover. And the fact that the women employed in the informal sector are not protected by social security and social protection measures. The other thing was the changing household roles and responsibilities. Women's household workload increased significantly, as everyone knows. Of course, they could work from home, there were positive aspects to it, but they were also, that also meant they not only had to do that work, but they were expected to do more than their usual share as well. But at the same time, we must say on the positive aspects, the roles of men and other members of the family also changed to some extent, and they did carry out roles that they traditionally didn't. On the health aspect, my colleague here has gone into quite a bit of the details, so I won't elaborate, but being in the line of work that a lot of women engaged in put them in the front line of being affected by COVID. It reduced the access to essential healthcare services. The loss of income also had negative impact, especially nutritional impact on families were severely affected. And there were also a lot of documented issues of increase in mental health issues during that time. And then of course you had the intimate partner violence increase because of the small spaces, that they were confined to, they were trapped in homes, and the uncertainty regarding livelihoods, which increased again, as my colleague has touched on that. I can move on. So of the issues that have arisen due to the prevailing gender relations, which are unfortunately upheld by the governance structures, such as the increase in the caregiving role, and the fact that gender-based violence increased, the majority of women in poorer groups in informal manual subsistence work, lost work opportunities, ended up having to bear the brunt of, both the COVID affecting them as well as being in the disaster situation. So that was basically cascading and compounded in the whole context. Of course, these observations also affected men in the communities, but some of these aspects are much more highlighted as in the case of women. So in reaction to these conclusions, we've come up with a few recommendations, both sort of specific to the research as well as a few more general ones. And the effort, some of these are that the effort towards creating awareness and sensitization on gender roles, especially during emergencies, is extremely important. And that there needs to be transformative action in ordinary times. It's only then that during emergencies, these can, be sort of useful, because otherwise the general structures, general inequalities that are in societies in emergencies only get compounded. The government needs to ensure documentation of gender and disability and disaggregated data, taking women and girls, people with disabilities, senior citizens, marginalized and other at-risk groups also into account. And this data, the right holders details, type of disabilities, age, sex, all these need to be collected and used to improve the country's appropriate response.
Someone has their sound.
To emergencies. So I think projects like GRRIPP need to come up with some tools that can help local governments with this process of how exactly to do that. The mechanisms should be in place to effectively respond to increases in violence. For example, in India, there's a special cell on gender violence management. But instead of them becoming, non-functional during emergencies, they need to be prepared to function in emergencies. So they need to be made active and continue to operate during emergencies. So that, continued business planning needs to sort of be in place. So such system need to be sensitive to the concerns of the females, the elderly, people with disability, the LGBTQI+, all of them, and they need to be sensitive to that and equipped to deal with those issues. Of course, national and state governments need to prioritize maternal and child health issues, look at sexual and reproductive health aspects during emergencies, and in situations where specific services are needed, like with COVID, you needed the vaccination. Make sure there are mechanisms that can reach those little pockets that get left behind. And even within communities, those little groups that get left behind. And of course, social protection nets have to be strengthened. Looking at some, in the last minute I have, just looking at some of the more governance-oriented recommendations, we need to make sure that governments have strategies to address issues of equalities and empowerment. These are national obligations. Governments have signed up to CEDAW, to the Paris Agreement, to the SDGs, to the Sendai frame, some they've signed up to, some they've kind of made commitments to. So they all indicate a poor status, so they need to do that. There's this, if the findings of the research shows lapses in accountability to half the population, to national and global priorities and commitments. So we need to take an inward look at the failure, at the root causes, and this will reconfirm what needs to be addressed. International community, human rights organizations, conventions, women's group, development partners, all of us in this room need to take this up and demand for tangible, robust measures. Without such fundamental transformation in governance and institutional approach, SDG 5 will remain far-fetched. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, we'll ask a question to Concita, and if you don't mind, I will ask in my own language because it's a bit weird to ask her in English. Concita.
But the Amazon is often described as the lung of humanity and has been at the heart of the debates on the climate change sustentável. In the Agenda to 2030 of the Human Amazon, could you explain why the preservation of Amazon and intersectionality is very important? Good afternoon. Nearly good evening to all of you, to all the people here. I ask for the Mother Earth and the ancestral force that drives me to initiate this dialogue. My name is Concita Maia. I'm from the Amazon, the state of Acre. I'm from the people from Mancineri. IMA, Institute of Women, Women of the Amazon Institute, where I belong in this territory, because it's part of the legal Brazilian Amazon, which compose 9 states. This feeling that drives me, it's a feeling that comes from the people that inhabit the Amazon. I will try to be brief to fulfill the time that I have to speak with you today. The mission of IMA, which is the Women of the Amazon Institute, is in the defense of the environment. We look at the environment as a whole, and we look into defending the Amazon, the forest, and the sovereignty of the forest and all the people that inhabit there, with the focus on the women who lives in the riverbanks, in the rural areas, in the cities, in the Amazon. And to start giving an answer, I told you I have to be brief, so I will try to answer the question. The Amazonia is seen internationally as the lung of humanity for all of us and for you, ladies and gentlemen, that knows very well that Amazon is the biggest biodiversity in our planet. And within this secret feminine that we belong, because we are here. It doesn't mean that we are here and the nature is there. We are one. We are the nature. And this way to defend the environment in a sustainable way for the Amazon and for the planet, it's a question of survival for the planet. It's been a very difficult question, especially in the last few years, that we had a government that destroyed so many of our public policies that we had in terms of the environment, and also against women's integrity. These destructions of these policies had a key focal in the original population and the women. The the indigenous people, and they were allowing mining, golden mining, genocide of the indigenous people, especially the Yanomamis. The development model of sustainability was in an emergency and completely destruction. So we need to gather strength, and that's where we went to our ancestral energy to keep and protect our forests and the dignity of our forests, because they were not only contaminated by the mining, deforestation, burning of our trees, total destruction of our forests, putting risk our biodiversity, not only putting in risk, but making and sure that the fauna and flora would be extincted with these people as well. And for that, we had to fight this predatory development of Amazon, where they established great projects that didn't fulfill the necessity of the people, of all our people that in there lived. Projects, for example, of the destruction of the forest in name of planting grass for the agribusiness. Projects of deforestation for the soya plantation. So this reality of our last government bring us a lot of consequences in our new political moment through our President Lula, who is having to be very brave, and he's got to have all the popular support from the civil society and groups to reconstruct our country, especially our Amazonia. Against all these policies, we establish many practices to assure a sustainable development. Because this scenery that I'm trying to show you had brought a lot of destruction with this burning of trees, which doesn't impact only the development, but also the people, and also bringing other issues like racism, and I speak a lot, don't I? And we, women, we are the daughters of Earth. We are from the Amazon forest, which is a feminine place. We are from the forest, which is a feminine. And we women are the guardians of life, the guardians of the knowledge, of the ancestral wisdom. And we are the guardian of the Amazon and the life in our planet. In this sense, as solution, I only have 1 minute. we worked on this agenda 21 to 2030, where you can find in our site the of GRRIPP. The agenda is in English, and this agenda has all the objectives that was established by the UN. So it's a set of proposals and directives that has the objective to ensure the life of women and the tribes and the people who live in the Amazon. And to finalize, this agenda has 8 points: the development to socio-ecological, agriculture, family, rural, policies to deal with crisis and climate change, the right for the land, equally for women in the land and in the cities, the right for sexual and reproductive rights, and fight against the traffic of young women and sexual exploration in the Amazon that happens a lot, and equally having equal in the society, and transformation of the power of, and having the women having a voice in society, especially in the Congress. Economic autonomy and social inclusion, it's all included in their agenda. And I thank you very much, GRRIPP, to have supported us. And we've established this agenda with 50 collaborators and more than 350 women who worked in this project. And this agenda that I suggest that you can have access through the site in the GRRIPP. And in the name of the women in Amazon, I thank you all. I thank you, GRRIPP, for believing us, believing in our strength for us to be the protagonists of defending the Amazon and the earth. Thank you.
Obrigada, Concita. Thank you, everyone. Quick Q&A, yeah?
Thank you so much to our panelists for those amazing contributions. We have about just over 5 minutes for a quick Q&A, so we welcome the audience in with us today and also online for any questions, comments, responses, and we will pass the microphone to you. Thank you.
Hi. I can speak up, it's all right. I have a question, and it's mainly based on the Brazilian sort of scenario just explained, so I'm going to ask it in Portuguese first. Estavas a explicar que com o Bolsonaro as coisas andaram para trás imenso. Com estas mudanças todas que estamos a apresentar, como é que podemos fazer que as coisas durem para além da nossa geração? I'll repeat in English. So with Bolsonaro, like, things went back a lot when it came to specifically the protection of the Amazon. So how can we sort of ensure that the changes we're bringing on with GRRIPP or with whatever else we do in our work, how can we ensure those changes stay past our generations?
Any other question? Let's take a round because we have limited time. Anyone else? Sorry, do you have questions online? Can you give a microphone to Sarah?
So I've got two questions from online. First one is every project in every country under GRIPP made disability friendly with disaster risk and climate change policies in mind? And the other one was that where can people find more information about the outcomes of the projects? Are there good books, resources? Where will we find the information about how the projects are going?
Okay, thank you. One last chance to ask a question. Yes, one here. Wait, it has to be on the microphone for translation.
Yeah, hi. Thank you to all the panelists, but it's a question across all the speakers. I think from my experience, I've seen that there's a sort of reinforcement of women's caregiving roles and community roles, and treating women as sort of community guardians of nature. So my question is there a sort of treatment of individual women as altruistic leaders? And how can we sort of practically tackle that in development interventions from your experience?
Thank you. So maybe first, Concita can reply to the question that was directly for Brazil, and then if anyone else wants to address the other questions about outcomes, resources, disability, and role of women.
Na verdade, as políticas de desenvolvimento sustentável,
sustainable development policies actually should be developed with the participation of the people, of the populations who live in the Amazon, be them indigenous populations or traditional populations, traditional communities. They know how sustainability can be achieved, how sustainable development can take place in the Amazon. So we have to listen to these people, these populations that live in the Amazon. They will be able to inform policies that will ensure the sustainable development of the Amazon and the sustainability of the planet. I hope I have answered your question. Yes?
Any of the panelists wants to answer one of the other questions about where to find more about your projects, outcomes, outputs, and about the question of disability? Oh, está sin... Okay. Hubo una pregunta sobre dónde se puede encontrar más informaciones sobre los proyectos, sus productos y sus outcomes. Y hubo una pregunta sobre lo cuánto los proyectos son inclusivos de la cuestión de discapacidades.
Maria vai falar? Sim. Depois.
So the first and the most important one is GRRIPP. Here UCL has a website and with the depository of all the information. But again, we have GRRIPP South Asia, GRRIPP Africa, GRRIPP Latin America, yes. And in all these stuff, they all have no?
Yeah? Okay, sorry. So I was saying that GRRIPP UCL it has a depository for all the information of the GRRIPP projects. This is GRRIPP South Asia, GRRIPP Latin America, and GRRIPP Africa. But all of us as GRRIPP grantees, some of us who are here today and others who were in the seminars in January and March, again, some have their own social media, this including websites, and that information of the project can be available there. There's a question you asked about women being perceived as guardian of nature, but I didn't get the last part. Oh, yeah. 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 Okay, thank you. So I'll try. So through GRRIPP, of course, and other interventions in our own organizations, we do really take a huge sense of appreciation of uncared work. And most of the organizations now, I see even academic research informs on the need of calculating and putting into account the amount of women that are spending to support their families, but also the other work that these women are doing. For instance, I'll take the the case of Tanzania, where women who are caregivers still in pastoralist tradition, they're the one who have to take care of the pastoralist, have to take care of the families, and have to still walk long distance to either fetch water and wherever that can be. But again, with the changing climate patterns and all these disasters which are happening, there's massive dying of these cattle. And still, there is no any reparations or payments for what is happening in their societies. What is changing now, and ILO 169, just in case I forgot the accurate law, clearly speaks about nations at different level to first accept, sign, and recognize the unpaid care work for women. But in our own initiative, we speak to women. That's why we say, for my language, will be demanding. Women now are coming up to demand for their rights. And this, they cannot be demanded if the micro law, the micro procedures, micro policies are not speaking with the macro policies. But again, the gap which the macro and micro which is happening is that despite of existence of those policies and strategies, there is no resources. And if resources are being channeled, women are not part of those resources. If we speak about climate financing, we know that there's some climate mechanism which speaks about clearly about how much percentage should be clearly given to women. But if you find out the statistics, meager amount of money is directed to women, and if at all reaches those women, if it reaches women, which group of women are able to be beneficiaries? So we really need to push the conversations about resilience, but responsive, but in specific implementation of these strategies and policies from the grassroots to the national and global spheres. But then we know that academic research, and I know my colleagues speak about the normative researchers, having these women telling their own stories to inform the policies, to inform the budgetary allocation, and for them to be able to question while they're sitting on those tables. We had a conversation this morning again, very few women still are able to navigate these areas. And even if women are in these spaces, some of them are not even to open their mouth because the spaces are so, men dominated.
Thank you. I would just really quickly like to answer the question about resources. All GRRIPP products, outputs, anything that has been created by the projects and the GRRIPP regions themselves are all on the GRRIPP website under resources. In the room today, we have QR codes at the back of the room. If you scan those, you'll be directed to the fact sheets. There's a fact sheet for all 23 projects, and there'll be more coming with the newer projects. And on the side, under the artwork, there are piles of all the fact sheets, so you can actually see them today. There's some really incredible resources on the website in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and we're still working on translating those. So just like to thank you. Pass to Louisa now.
There was a question relating to women and people with disabilities, and we are very much touched by those issues. We are anti-racist, and we are also in favor of people with disability. We are advocates as well. So we propose and we carry this out in practice, practices of inclusion through accessibility for women who are visually impaired or who have mobility problems or are wheelchair bound. So more than ever, we need to have policies to ensure the accessibility for people with disabilities. It is a matter of respect, of inclusion, and of dignity. And to end, we have an Instagram account, IMA dot Brazil, not capitalized and with an S. ima.brasil. Come and visit us.
I'm so sorry, I know they have much more to say, but we're running out of time and we have a reception just behind waiting for us. Thank you so much. Obrigada, gracias. Thank you to those who came here. Thank you for those who are online. Thank you so much to the UCL team for putting this all together. GRRIPP is all about them, it's about their work, and we are so honored that you came here to London to teach a little bit about what you're doing and to make us think a little bit more globally. And yeah, I hope we can all learn from you. So thank you so much. I hope we'll see you again in London. Thanks everyone, and please help yourselves to drinks and food.